Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I'm your host, ObjectivelyDan, and joining me from a faraway place is Johnny, friend of the atheist community of Austin, who's been on a couple different shows here, just friend of the show. Wanted to jump on with me today. How's it going, Johnny?
Things are going great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you guys can see, again, we are doing things a little bit differently. I'm doing this from my apartment, and I got some of the studio guys on the line with me right now. We're using a bit of a different system, which means we have a different phone number for you guys to call in for this show. And so the phone number for that is going to be 512-991-9242. Okay. And I'm not going to repeat that because we're going to have that posted in the chat. If you guys are listening to this, a recording of this, it doesn't even matter. So the number for that's going to be out there. Just remember, we're doing things a little bit differently. And the number is also changed in the logo there as well for Truth Wanted. This is the show where we talk about what people believe and why every week. We take your guys' calls, and I get to talk to a special guest this week, being, of course, Johnny. Now, Johnny, we were talking before, and I was excited to have you on in particular because you are a lawyer, and we were talking about sovereign citizens. And I understand that you've had some encounters with some sovereign citizens, right?
I have had encounters with sovereign citizens. I love sovereign citizens.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I worked in some court systems in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to get to,
well, what did you want to ask
me? I
want
to get to the definition of sovereign citizens, but first, I need to plug some stuff really, really quickly. So tomorrow, if you're watching this stream right now, tomorrow, I and Johnny are going to be on a live game night featuring a bunch of ACA people, and so you should check out the link to that. It's going to be cool. It's going to start at 6 p.m. Central Time. We already got a test stream tonight with Quiplash, and I already won, so your boy's going to win this one. There is a prize. I don't know if the prize has been officially announced yet, but I am going to get that prize. So if you want to represent your boy, Objectively Dan, in the chat on game night, we have to have some sort of secret code. So like send like a sunglasses emoji or something to know that you're on my team. Cause it's going to be man versus man out there, and woman and non-binary. Everybody's going to be out there. It's just, everybody's going to be fighting for themselves. So be looking forward to that. Also, we have memberships as well. So if you're interested in supporting the show, consider doing our YouTube memberships. We have some of those. You get some cool little emojis there and stuff. And of course, we also have the Patreon and our merch store. So that's that Teespring site, the AEN merch store. Please check that out as well if you're interested in getting some cool stuff. Again, I like to wear my Truth Wanted hoodie around the house. It's literally the most comfiest hoodie I've ever had. That's not a joke. I love that thing. So yeah, there's the bit.ly link for that, bit.ly/AEN merch. So that's all for the plugs at the beginning of the show. Now let's get to the meat and potatoes of this. We're talking about sovereign citizens. That's what I want to start the show talking about. What is, Johnny, a sovereign citizen?
A sovereign citizen is a person who believes in what I call an alternate universe kind of legal reasoning, where it looks our world, but everything's just off. Everything's wrong. They believe that, well, there's a wide variety of beliefs. In 1936, the U.S. government sold all of our rights to international banking, international conglomerates, and you can reclaim those rights if you rescind your rights as a U.S. citizen and you reclaim them as a sovereign. And they cite to all kinds of strange things. So one of my favorite things is right at the beginning of the early days of the country, there was an attempt to pass the first version of the 11th Amendment. And it ended up not getting ratified by all of the states, and except a school, I believe it was in Virginia, published some students, and they mistakenly published it as though it were actually enacted. And the sovereigns will clamp onto that secret 11th Amendment, and they will claim that all of these secret rights are available to sovereigns and the federal government has no power, all based upon some text. And I remember looking at it maybe 10 years ago and being completely stunned at what it doesn't say and what they claim.
Yeah, so like,
so it's a lot of,
my understanding is that, you know, this term sovereign citizen is kind of an umbrella term because it applies to a lot of different kind of legal beliefs, I guess. It's not really one particular, like you mentioned, like kind of the starting point, which was this idea that, oh, you basically don't count in the federal system. You're kind of your own person. But like sovereign citizens on YouTube and stuff and all these other posts, what I tend to see is they post these legal blogs or they make these points on, according to the Black's Law book or something, like this law doesn't apply to you. You don't have to pay your taxes this year, or you can stand on this property because it's for anybody to use, or you don't have to listen to the cops when they talk to you, you know, like that kind of stuff. Right. And I don't know about you, but it seems to be a growing trend right now for the sovereign citizen stuff. Like I see more and more of it now than probably what I used to. The fact that we're even talking about it now, I think is interesting enough. And people are having a really big heyday with it right now because of the COVID-19 precautions that a lot of cities and stuff are taking. I see a lot of talk from the sovereign citizens that are like, hey, the government can't tell us to stay in our homes. This is BS. You know, we got to be able to go out on the streets and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's true. Typically it's, I would love to go undercover to a sovereign meetup group after the COVID-19 quarantine is over. They are typically, I think, fairly peaceful people. There's been some unfortunate cases where sovereigns will get into shootouts with police officers. They'll get dragged out of their vehicles because they'll refuse to comply with lawful orders for traffic stops and things like that. It's what I see online, and I watched a lot of videos of people appearing in court, trying to claim their sovereign rights and what have you. And what it really amounts to is they want to avoid responsibility for their actions. They want to avoid the consequences for the things that they do, like pay child support, drive without a license, drive while intoxicated, things like that. And they're desperate people. They have heard some bad advice and they're going with it. And I think there's a wonderful video, and I need to share it. I need to share it with you, where there's a sovereign online. He's at an arraignment for his bail or something with his bail, and he did not appear as an individual or as a person. He didn't appear as the individual. He appears as the person, and that he should be let go because it's only the individual who is convicted of the crime, and the judge really has a field day with him.
I think that's really that video.
Happens. There's a lot of videos where lawyers and judges. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, one. Like so.
And you can see the guys behind him who are waiting.
I've seen that video, and I've seen other ones I've seen are just sovereign citizens just out on the streets, like talking to cops and like trying to assert their rights, or them getting pulled over and telling the cops, "Hey, you can't look at my papers" or something like that. So, like, I just, you know, you have some experience with talking with some sovereign citizens from your legal career, and I was just wondering, like, are there any stories that can kind of highlight some of this stuff? Like, I love to hear some of that.
Sure. I had one case maybe 10 years ago, maybe not quite 10 years ago, but it's been some time, where the woman was suing a judge, and she claimed that the judge committed an 8th Amendment violation, which is I think it was a conditions of confinement, or it might have been a due process claim. The thing is, I couldn't understand what the claim was all about. So I went ahead and I contacted the lady, and I said, "Ma'am, I'm looking over your filing here, and I have no idea what's going on. Can you please explain to me, and maybe I can try to clarify it for you?" And that was the outer edge of the black hole, and it just went completely into it, and I couldn't escape. What she was saying was, well, the judge didn't consider some evidence that I had submitted in this criminal case that I wasn't involved with. I was just a person who knew the person who was accused. And by not considering my evidence, the judge committed this crime. And I said, well, man, I don't understand. She started going into, well, you can pay. She paid her filing fees, or she tried to pay her filing fees using this long number. Turns out it was her social security number. And I said, ma'am, what's that number on your pleading? She's like, oh, that's my Treasury account number. And I said, is that your social security number? And she said, yes. And I said, why did you put that there? And she said, well, you can pay your bills using your social security number because every citizen has access to their own personal Treasury account, and I'm paying it from that bank account. And I said, ma'am, you can't do that. That's a crime. You can't claim that you have a bank account. I was like, I'm there, but like, you can't do that.
Oh my gosh.
You know?
That's crazy.
There was also a guy. Yeah. There was a guy who sued judges. He sued a lot of judges, and I knew this one judge, and he was a colonel in the Air Force Reserve. I believe he was a colonel in the Air Force Reserve. And when you read this guy's pleadings, he would accuse you of absolutely everything under the sun. He accused this judge, who was a really stand-up guy, of being dishonorably discharged from the Army in a pleading, which I think that's defamation. But whenever he would appear in court, he would be real nice. He had his pressed denim on. He'd have his bolo tie and his cowboy shirt, and he spoke with yes, sir, no, sir. There was another guy who was parking his vehicles on the state right-of-way on the side of the highway. And I called him up and I said, hey, man, you can't park your vehicles. He had a U-Haul franchise. And I said, you can't park your U-Hauls and stuff over there. And he's like, yes, I can. And I said, no, you can't. You don't own that. That's trespassing on state property. He said that he had a Spanish land grant, which is something that they love.
Oh, wow. Man, like, okay, so.
Yeah, he said a allodial title.
Man, so this is something I've noticed with sovereign citizens is kind of like with conspiracy theorists, or, I made the joke the other day, you should call them conspiracy allegationists, because that's really what they are. But, with conspiracy theorists, they never just believe in one conspiracy theory. It's always multiple conspiracy theories, usually, at least a couple. And also, like, if it's like anti-vax stuff, well, chances are they don't have a formal education in biology. Like, usually they don't have the formal education in a lot of the stuff that they're talking about. And I feel like it's the same thing with the sovereign citizens. Usually they're not lawyers, or they're not people who've studied law in any formal way, but they've read a couple of stuff online, and they have a wide encompassing range of different ideas. It's usually not just like one particular tick. Like, is that kind of true to your experience?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they scanned an article briefly, and maybe they underlined the fancy words, and then they reconstructed it themselves without checking with what the case law says or what the statutes say, or consulting with a legal professional. I like that they're trying to figure out the society that we live in, the laws that we have all agreed, well, some of us have agreed, the process has agreed that we're going to follow, but they just kind of stop. They take some advice and they don't ever check to see if that advice is correct. And they just kind of ramble. The pleadings, I've read a lot of them over the years in one form or another. And a lot of them are pro se. They're not represented by attorneys. In fact, they're almost exclusively represented by attorneys. And these are crazy legal theories. I remember one time a guy was suing, and he was claiming to be suing for 750 years for something. And I just thought that was outrageous. And I think his mentality on that was, well, if I get 1% of that, then I'll settle for 1% of $750 million. That'd be a pretty good boon for me. But no, there's a lot of videos online. They're a fascinating group of people. There's a lot of them in Alaska. There's a lot of them in, of course, like the mountainous states like Colorado and Wyoming. And there's a whole bunch of them in Texas as well.
Huh. So
Um,
I gotta ask,
but
how
yeah,
organized are these folks? Are they like, are there splinter groups? Do they have groups that they associate with, or is this like individuals kind of coming together on this stuff?
I think that a lot of them are individuals, but I think that there's a crossover with militiamen. I think there's
Hmm.
crossovers with a lot of the survivalist types, folks who have a lot of bug out bags and things like that in case shit gets real. Um,
Yeah.
but they're just biding their time before the end times, right?
Mm.
Um, it's it's for me, that kind of thinking, that kind of irrational or that twisted logic thing. I just can't get enough of it, and I've stayed away from the sovereigns for a couple of months now. But if I see anything in the news, I'm right down the rabbit hole again. I can't get enough of it, and I really hope we get some sovereigns calling today.
Look, if
I would love
if
that.
we had a sovereign citizen call in on this show today, that would be fantastic. But I do just want to remind people we have open lines. This is Truth Wanted. We talk about whatever you want to talk about, really. I mean, as long as you have a belief or you have a story you want to convey. If you know have a story about sovereign citizens, or not, it doesn't even have to be about sovereign citizens at all. We'd love to take your guys' call today because that's what we like to do.